This video is going to be a post-commentary explanation of the new game Dante speedrun route for Devil May Cry 2. In Devil May Cry 2, Dante is tasked with defeating an evil corporate businessman named Arius who wishes to become a god. At the very start of the game, we're going to be introduced to Dante's new dedicated dodge roll, which is on the circle button for PS4 and the B button for Xbox. We're going to use this a lot during the course of the run in order to navigate through areas quicker than just walking or running. We're going to pick up our first red orb, which is the currency that we're going to use to upgrade our weapons as well as buy items. And the items that we're going to be buying are primarily purple orbs and devil stars in order to make full use of Dante's devil trigger, which is his more powered up version of himself, which gives his moves new properties and allows him to do more damage. Most of these enemies in the first level we are able to just bypass, so we're just going to dodge roll through the cityscape right past them. I should also note that Dante does have immediate access to air hike or his double jump at the very start of Devil May Cry 2. This is different from Devil May Cry 1 and most of the other Devil May Cries where you have to unlock this ability. Here we're going to pick up our first gold orb, and the only one that will, optimally grab throughout the run. A gold orb on death will allow us to revive right at the spot that we were killed at with full health and full devil trigger. This first fight here, we're going to use some simple combos to try and maintain a high stylish rank, because at higher stylish ranks, the enemies drop more orbs, and with more orbs we are able to buy items earlier and more frequently. These enemies are called the Agon of Innis. They usually wield either 2 saw blades or 2 wheels. Once this third wave spawns in, we're going to stand near the red wall of the fight and fire our chain guns from our devil-triggered guns. This next fight, we're going to try and go around the room in a clockwise motion, killing all the enemies in a row and while maintaining a high stylish rank. And we're going to be mixing in gunshots along with melee attacks in order to maintain style as well as dodge rolls. Both of these things, although they may not do much damage, or at all in the dodge roll's case, it will maintain the style rank and reset the timer for expiration on it. Here we've achieved showdown, and you can actually see the gun reset the expiration timer there, as the showtime begins to fade away. As we gain more and more devil trigger, we'll look to do a full clear of the room here with our machine guns. Unfortunately, I did drop the combo here, but no matter, I can still waste the rest of the enemies rather quickly. With these last enemies downed, or almost, a key will be dropping soon that will allow us to go through the gate. This is one of the few carryovers from DMC1 as well, where Dante had to grab rusty keys in order to unlock doors. There's only a couple instances in this game of that. And that about wraps up Mission 1, as we're going to just continue dodge rolling through the area to the end of the mission. I should note that throughout the course of this run, I'll be choosing some alternative, safer strategies that I like to use, which are a little bit older in comparison to what the world record uses, though the strats that I apply are more consistent and only lose a little bit of time in comparison. Most of the strats that the world record uses make use of the form called Majin that Dante has, which we'll be introduced to on Mission 5. Majin form is something that Dante can only access when he is at red health, so almost dying is very optimal to beating bosses quickly or clearing a couple of rooms. However, doing this consistently and multiple times throughout the course of the run is very risky, so I prefer to just use some of the slower but more consistent strats. This puzzle here is a light wheel, or we have to destroy some light orbs by doing a 1-2 stinger combination. There are some random patterns here where the orbs can appear, but here I actually got a couple of really good patterns. So I was able to get a 2-cycle on the lights that are shown above, or the blue flames and the red flames. Whenever I complete a wheel, the lights turn blue. I'm sorry, I just can't stop thinking about Mills just in different scenarios. I'm just imagining like Mills as a guest character on the Bob Ross show now. That right there was an example of one of Dante's alternative combos in this game, which are not really explained very well within the context of the tutorials that the game offers. To do some of Dante's alternative attacks, you have to tilt the analog stick left or right while doing the melee, or while hitting the melee button. This allows him to do some extra spins on his attacks as well as get a couple extra hits in general. This next part is going to be our first example where we're going to be disabling the lock-on system by holding down the right trigger, or R2. This makes it so that Dante doesn't feel the need to target the pyromancers or the other wizards that are in the room, but instead target the light wheel that I'm hitting. This makes it so that we don't have to fight the wizards before we can do the light wheel. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, dude. We're just going to take my 2-inch stick and put it... In the next room, there's going to be a pad that we can stand on in order to refill our devil trigger gauge automatically. I'm going to stand on this at the very beginning of the fight to start the fight with full devil trigger, and then use my increased damage output to waste all the enemies in the room. Then I'm going to stand by the object that we're going to pick up in a little bit called the aerial heart. But first these goats are going to drop down. The one on the right will always drop down to meet you, and the one on the left will always stay in the air. Here you can use your melee combos along with Stinger, which Dante also has unlocked from the very start of the game as well. Again, in contrast to DMC1, where you have to unlock that ability. The aerial heart is part of a system for the devil trigger, which uses amulets. And this devil trigger amulet allows us to, as per the name, fly, which allows us to just exit the level. Going into Mission 3, we're going to actually get our first taste of this game's bosses, as well as pick up the first upgrade for the Rebellion. This upgrade is going to allow the Rebellion to do a bit more damage, and it's going to be important to some of the boss stun cycles as well as damage cycles. Before that, though, we have to contend with a goat that's spewing flames at us. And here we can just use the dodge roll iframes to avoid as many of the flames as possible. After that, we're going to use Dante's tilt combo in order to stun lock the goat. With the goat defeated, we're going to be heading into the very first boss fight of the game, which is the gorilla, or Orange Guerrera. The gorilla likes to stick to the top of the ceiling and hang from it, as well as shoot down shards of glass at you, and do that body slam as well. The point of this fight is to just wait until he comes down, and then use a move called Million Stab, where you do 2 strikes of melee in Devil Trigger, and then tilt the analog stick right or left, and then mash as hard as you can. Normally this depletes a lot of your Devil Trigger gauge, but only if you stay in Devil Trigger while doing it. What we do in the speedrun is that we deactivate the Devil Trigger as soon as Million Stab is initiated, so that it doesn't waste any of our Devil Trigger. Unfortunately, I was grabbed here by Orange Guerrera, but it's not too much of a hamper on the fight. I still have plenty of Devil Trigger left to waste him. And with Orange Guerrera down, we grab a key, and then we head out the door to end the level. Oh my Lord Jesus in heaven. Oh man. It's not even a gold, but alright. He said go mod my subreddit. This next fight is actually going to be the first where we're going to use the Majin form, and it's also the first where we're going to have to take damage intentionally. The serpent, or Medusa as I like to call her, is surrounded by poison gas, and is also surrounded by 4 tentacles that are attached to her main body. Damaging the tentacles does a little bit of damage to her, but not as much as damaging her main body. So, in order to defeat her optimally, we're going to let the tentacles smack us while we sit in the corner and fire our guns at her main body, until we are in the red health zone. But first, we're going to go do the one and only skip in this game, called the Quick Heart Skip. Normally, what you would have to do to get through this gate is activate this light wheel here, with the Quick Heart equipped, which is through the doorway in the background, and then use the Devil Trigger running animation to get through. Fortunately, we can just dodge roll through. I grab this green orb here to make sure that my life is at max, so that I can calculate accurately the amount of times that the tentacle needs to hit me in order to always land me into the red zone of health, in order to activate the Majin Devil Trigger. As the fight opens up, I just go right over to Jukot Golm's left, and then let the tentacle hit me, while I fire my pistols at her. Once I hit red health, I'm going to actually target the tentacle in the background, so that when I go into Majin form and fire my fireballs at Jukot Golm, it will pass not only through the main body but the tentacle, but also hit the tentacle itself, so that Jukot Golm can't actually activate her shield. If she activates her shield, we cannot damage her, and she is forced through this phase a few times. So, in order to one-cycle her properly, we have to hit both. And there is the first Majin instance, and the boss is down. Walking over to the right here, there will be a door that opens up to show a motorcycle that Dante acquires, though we never actually get to play with it. Instead, we're going to be able to pick up the shotgun, which is a very, very strong weapon in this game, as it is in all the rest of the Devil May Crys. It allows us to cancel our shots with the pistols in order to do optimal DPS with shotgun canceling. So what you would do is shoot, cancel, or switch to the shotgun, and then shoot again, and repeat that process. Going into Mission 5, we're going to be getting a purple orb, which will refill our Devil Trigger at the very start, as well as increase the amount of time we can spend in Devil Trigger. For these wolves, called Gary and Frecky, we just have to mow them down with our machine gun Devil Triggers. We have to switch targets periodically, so that the wolves don't get stunned and we lose DPS. Once the wolves go down into stun, they cannot take damage. So you have to back off on the stun gauge a little bit every so often in order to cycle them properly. Here we're also going to see the first example of how powerful the shotgun is with its knockback, as 1 or 2 shots from the shotgun will knock down these goats, allowing us to get really strong combos on them to defeat them. And for the combos to defeat them, we generally just want to do 1, 2, 3 high time, and then do Dante's kicks into a Helmbreaker if need be. And the Helmbreaker is the giant slam move that Dante does in order to send himself back down to the earth with his sword. For some reason, the Pula here isn't taking any damage, but we're just going to move on back to the Blood Goats and try and finish them off. After they're finished, we'll move on to the Bird or the Pula again. The next enemy that we're going to fight are going to be the tanks. And the tanks have a bunch of RNG to them as far as whether or not they're going to use their minigun on you while you're on top of them, because the tanks have eyes on them that are their vulnerable spots. So in order to inflict the most damage to them at a time, you have to target the eye. And if you're not in Devil Trigger, they're going to interrupt you with their minigun a lot. That is if you get bad RNG. I believe here I did get pretty decent RNG on this first tank. There is also the danger of the tank in the background here firing its rockets at you. So fortunately I was able to go to the second tank with a lot of health, a lot of Devil Trigger, and pretty much no minigun RNG. There's the minigun right there, doing a lot of damage to us. So eventually, if it gets too bad, I will have to Devil Trigger. Hey Gamal, how are you, man? Oh, I'm from India now. Look, I don't know how you pick up on all the intricacies, like, I don't get it. Here I'm going to use Dante's Helmbreaker and Devil Trigger in order to do a lot of damage to the eye at once, as well as just kind of avoid any sort of minigun shenanigans. And then just wrap it up with a lot of Devil Trigger for the upcoming flight section. And here's everybody's favorite boss, the infested chopper. So the game throws the chopper at you at least 3 or 4 times, but you only have to fight it once, and that's at the very end of the mission. So what we're going to do here is just ascend the tower and completely ignore the chopper using the aerial heart. You wee bastard. I'm glad you're doing good, by the way, Gamal. This next section is going to be a lot of movement, but there's a little neat movement trick that we're going to do here called pistol jumps. So what you do at the apex of a jump with the pistols equipped is you use the pistols to gain a little bit of extra height with the animation. And that's how we skip a little bit of extra platforming. It's not a whole lot of time saved, but it's enough to be relevant. So here we go. Jump, pistols, jump, pistols. Same deal here. Once again, I'm going to grab that green orb there in order to make sure that my health is at full so I can calculate the amount of damage that the chopper is going to do to me so I can go into the Majin form. There is a gold orb at the bottom there in case this fight goes south. And if I die, you know, having to waste my gold orb, then there is that backup there in case I need it. So most people, when they fight this chopper, they just shoot their guns at it and just wait until it dies. Here I'm actually going to take 4 missiles from the chopper to the face in order to get Devil Trigger as well as be able to access the Majin form. And then once the Majin form is active, I'm just going to shoot fireballs at the eye on the infested chopper again, and it's going to go down in a matter of seconds. The only RNG here is whether or not the chopper will fire 3 missiles or 4, and it shoots them in groups of 2. So I can adjust what I need to do based on whether or not there's 1 or 2 firing at me accordingly. And then here goes the chopper with the Majin form. I'm going to use the free Devil Star that the game gives me at the very beginning. And then down goes the chopper. That shit, yeah, there we go. We got the time save, so that's great. I really hope I don't lose this minute here. I really hope I don't. This next fight is just a boss that has 2 phases to it. And the first phase is it's going to be attached to the side of a building. And we're going to be using a lot of shotgun canceling as well as melee attacks in order to do a lot of DPS to it and build a lot of Devil Trigger for the upcoming phase, because your Devil Trigger and your health do carry over from phase to phase. So there's the example of the shotgun canceling, where we do shot with the shotgun, a shot with the pistols, and we keep switching. This builds a decent amount of Devil Trigger, but also does a whole lot of damage to it. As you can see, we've almost depleted its first full life bar. Once the bats start coming out from the sides of the boss, we're going to use Dante's High Time in order to kill the bats and gain a ton of Devil Trigger. This is going to allow us to pump even more DPS into the boss on the next phase, as well as do a decent amount to it on this phase. And then we're going to keep canceling with the shotguns and the pistols in order to finish it off. On this phase of the boss, it has a shotgun-like blast that comes out of its mouth. So what I'm going to need to do is stay to the side and hit its cheeks with the move called the round trip, or the aerial rave that Dante has, where he's in the air and then he throws his sword in a circle. The alternative to this is that I can also use the million stab if need be. The way I want to position this boss, or just hope that it goes to a corner so that if it doesn't get pushed away by my attacks. Here I got a pretty good angle on it, and so I got a ton of damage there for just a small non-DT'd million stab. Want to make sure that we avoid its attacks in between the phases where it's actually sitting down as well. And there goes the boss. How was that stomping noise? Did any of y'all hear that through the mic? The stomping noise? Cold blind. This next mission is going to have us going through a futuristic factory in order to and this is the part of the run where we're actually going to be sacrificing a bunch of time in the next couple of missions. Because before, the way this game was ran was that you just spearheaded through the missions and you didn't really pick up a lot of upgrades that were in the missions. However, like I mentioned before, there's an amulet system to this game where you can actually upgrade your Devil Trigger and customize it with amulets according to what you want. There are 2 amulets in this mission, as well as an additional weapon called the Vendetta. I did not grab it in my run here because we had incorrect data on the Vendetta. However, the Vendetta is part of the route and doesn't cost any time to get. So in a marathon setting, I would grab the Vendetta, but that's later on. This amulet here that I'm going to be picking up costs about 30 seconds to get, but the amount of damage that we'll get from this amulet, which is called the Fire Heart, is just very absurd in the mid to late game. And as proven by the current world record, it is invaluable to the late game because it also ramps up your Majin in addition to your regular Devil Trigger, and it causes a ton of stun on later bosses. We're going to combine this later with a heart called the Offense Heart, and those 2 together, which were actually fixed on this port of Devil May Cry 2. The Offense Heart did not function properly in the PS2 version. Both the damage increase and a speed increase were both on the Quick Heart. So in order to run this game on PS2, you would need to grab the Quick Heart no matter what. However, on the HD Collection port that we're playing here on PC, all the amulets function as intended. So we can grab both the Offense Heart and the Fire Heart to maximize our DPS. We're just going to fly through this room with the Devil Trigger. And normally what I would be doing here as well is activating this right here and then grabbing the Vendetta during this downtime. Instead, I'm just going to be grabbing these couple of red orbs. But normally what I'd be doing here now is just grabbing the Vendetta, which is a shorter but wider sword that Dante has, and it deals more damage.
Also, you said that you box, don't you?
For this next fight, we're going to actually want to stagger our damage a little bit in order to maintain a high combo ranking again, because there's a lot of enemies that spawn in the train section coming up, and we want to get as many red orbs as we can out of them. However, if we kill them too quickly, the waves won't spawn in a opportune manner. So we have to stagger damage a little bit in order to make sure that all the timed waves come in relatively quickly after one another so that we can keep the combo going and still dispatch them at the same time. We're going to skip these blood goats here. We don't actually need to fight them.
I don't think I'm unintelligible enough.
This section here otherwise is just an auto-scroller, and the only thing really to pay attention to is your combo gauge on the right side of the screen. Again, you can use not only the 1-2 stinger combos or 1-2-3 stinger, you can also use dodge rolls and the gunshots from Ebony and Ivory in order to maintain combo rankings pretty quickly. So this is why I'm actually just using the human form of Dante here instead of resorting entirely to Devil Trigger. Here I'm going to use it a little bit just to down a couple of pesky enemies as well as stun that one that was creeping up right behind me. But then I'm going to go right back to the human form for just a little bit, then switch back to Devil Trigger, and then really just waste everybody down with those machine guns in DT. Because at this point I've got Showtime and all the waves are kind of coming in relatively quickly after one another, so I can just down all of them. Unfortunately didn't get that one last guy there, but not too big of a deal. Now we're sitting on like 14,000 red orbs, which is quite a lot for this point in the game.
The man with Nutella butters his bread. I'm glad that caught on. Trying to make that a thing.
If the elevator coming up actually didn't have invisible walls above it when you were in Devil Trigger, for some reason in this game, lifts and elevators, if you go into flight mode in Devil Trigger, there's an invisible wall above you, and you actually can't ascend at all. However, you can jump in human form, but so if we were able to just fly up these lift shafts, then we would be saving a lot more Devil Trigger coming out of that train. Unfortunately, that's not the case, so instead we just have to use our pistols on the bats here and just prevent them from doing any shenanigans to us, as well as grabbing the couple of red orbs that are down here. There is also a jump you can make here when the camera shifts as well, in order to just jump out a little bit quicker. I could have jumped out a little bit quicker there, but not too big of a deal. This next fight is going to be with the bull boss, and here we're going to grab another purple orb, and then we're really going to get to see the power of the fire heart as well in action with Million Stab. And basically we're going to keep the boss either stun locked, or we're going to power through its attacks when it does get an attack off. So there it gets staggered, and then here it's going to just get staggered again. And we're just going to repeat this process. Here I have to tank the attack that it does with Devil Trigger. But I've still got plenty left because, again, doing this Million Stab here with the method that we have doesn't cost barely any Devil Trigger. There I've got to tank another attack and then just repeat it. For the last attack here, I'm just going to stay in Devil Trigger just to do extra damage and make sure that it's dead, because this is the end of the mission, and my Devil Trigger is not going to carry over from mission to mission.
Yeah, that is actually pretty easy clout, like no joke. Alright, everybody.
Coming up on about the halfway point of the game, this is the classic Capcom escape sequence mission. And really it's just going to be a whole lot of dodge rolling through areas, grabbing those red orbs there. We're also going to grab the offense heart here, which is going to be in a little crevice off to Dante's right when we enter the next room. We're actually also going to see a glimpse of the Vendetta here too, but like I said, at the time that I did this, we didn't have accurate data on the Vendetta or the Merciless. The Merciless is not used at all because of its weaker attack power, but at the time we were doing this, Vendetta had been routed out due to that data. So then we come into this room and we're just going to fly back up again. And the reason that we actually grab the offense heart here instead of on the previous mission is because we can actually just use the offense heart to fly up here quicker than it would be to just go around in a circle up the stairs. And that allows us to skip a whole lot of running. Once again, we're going to have to disable the lock-on system here by holding R2 in order to ignore the enemies and hit the light wheels in order to open up the door that's right at the top of the stairs here as well. Going to be a pistol jump there, as well as a wall hike. And then we're going to enter the hangar where there's a plane that has a missile launcher in it. However, in most runs, you won't see many top runners grab this missile launcher because it's generally just not needed. It also disables your ability to really effectively do shotgun cancels, and a lot of the bosses that we used to tackle with the missile launcher, we tackle now with Majin. So really it would just be grabbed for safety purposes, but once you enter the biplane here, you can just run right back out. The missile launcher is in those cabinets. Depending on how a run is going up to this point would determine really whether or not you were going to grab the missile launcher or not. The Missile Launcher, though, for what it's worth, it does do quite a bit of burst damage. It's just rather slow, so it's mostly detrimental to times. This next boss is the Moth boss, which spawns larvae from it. And the larvae on this version of the game, until they've gone into their like fully grown state, you can't actually target them. On the PS2 version, you can just target the larvae in their infant states and just, you know, blast them with the shotgun or with the pistols away. It would be very helpful on this version of the game if we were able to do that, but unfortunately we have to let them go to their fully grown state. So the strat for this boss involves actually exploiting a mechanic that the larvae have on them, which is that they pretty much eat you indefinitely if they swallow you. And they drain your health until you shake out with the analog stick. So what we're going to be doing is intentionally letting the larvae swallow us, and this is just the fastest way to take them out anyway, after the boss is down. But this is just a prior fight than the boss. I'm just going to skip over. There's not really a whole lot going on. But we're going to let one of the larvae intentionally eat us, and then shake out at a pretty low health quantity so that we can just immediately get into Majin state and then Majin the boss. We're also going to see the first instance of Dante's laser move that he gets in Majin, or as I like to call it, the Hyper Viper Beam, after Cable's move in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. So here's that coming up right in a second after this guy stops getting away from me here. So we're just going to lay down a little bit of extra. Well, we can't actually get the damage off here, so we're just going to let it eat us, and then you're going to see the analog stick wiggle quite violently in order to get out almost at the last second. And then we're going to use the fireballs here on the moth. Once the moth is down, I'm going to activate the laser here, and it's just going to really lay waste to at least one or two larvae. In this case, it was one, but optimally it would be two. I'm going to then use the Vital Star Small that the game also gives me for free at the beginning. And then I'm just going to use that so that I don't die to these larvae when I'm letting them swallow me, and then I break out of them. The alternate strategy to dealing with these larvae is that if they're surfacing in such a way that they can't really swallow you, you have to just deal a little bit of damage to them so that you can gain some devil triggers, so that if they then pop up with a less than full health bar, you can just lay waste to them as well with a couple of DT stingers and a couple of different combos. But other than that, that's pretty much the mission wrapped up. I just gotta kind of wait on these larvae to eat me or to just die here. I lost quite a bit of time here because the larvae decided to spawn in such uncooperative ways, which is not really problematic other than just sort of flat time loss. It doesn't really put the run in any sort of danger. This next mission features actually one of the most infamous textures, I think, in this game. It's very jarring to the eyes, but that's fortunately only about 5 seconds. You only see it for about 5 seconds. We're going to grab a purple orb here. The boss on this level is called Bulwark, which is actually a boss that fought Sparta. And this game wanted him to be basically the Nello Angelo of this game. However, Bulwark doesn't have really any lines, so you have to kind of look up the lore in the game in order to understand that. Most of this mission is sort of just going to be like some Indiana Jones Tomb Raider type stuff, where we're going to be going through these underground sections, activating some light wheels, and, you know, just basically breaking into this underground tomb or underground temple. There's even going to be a little chase sequence with a boulder too.
Not round trip. That's like not as sketch as round trip. Pure swinger's fun.
Little height gain there with the guns again. Very nice for movement.
I mean, I'd imagine that you probably have to do it though.
Oh, so here's our friend the boulder coming up. Yeah, there he is. Here you can just get away from him with a couple dodge rolls. And then there's the spike traps. Here you just want to dodge roll to the end of the room and then use a million stab in order to get through this pretty quickly, and then you can just keep going about your business. There's another puzzle here where you have to do some platforming. I guess I wouldn't really call it a puzzle. It's mostly just platforming. But we're just going to skip all of it by flying to the top of the room. And then we're going to use the remaining devil trigger that we have in order to fight the boss. And the boss is actually guarded by the two wolves that we saw earlier, and they tend to really mess with the camera. For some reason, the camera wants to hone in on the wolves rather than on you and Bulwark. I guess the idea is that the game wanted you to take out the wolves before defeating Bulwark. But unfortunately, that for the camera, that's not that fast. So among the speedrunning community, Bulwark has a little bit of a nickname called the Cameraman because he's just never the focus at all. It seems like he controls the camera to be where he wants it to be with his wolves. But generally the strategy for this guy is really to just go into Devil Trigger and just use the Stinger move on him until he dies. As you can tell, when he attacks us more, that's actually better for us because that means he's not teleporting away or doing any attacks that are, going to be really quick and hard to react to, like that slam there. And it also means that if he's not teleporting away, the auto-targeting system is not going to try and target the wolves immediately. Because that is the other danger, is that if he teleports away, you're going to target the wolves and then you have to lock back on to him. This next mission just has two parts to it. The first, we're just going to be hitting some triangles in order to gain access to the next room, which is going to be the boss called Pluto. And the boss, Pluto, is really just, it's a, I don't even know how to describe it. It's an enemy that wields two ball and chains on its arms. And we're really just going to want to million stab it like we've seen the other, some of the other bosses be taken down. The optimal strategy for it is that you actually save a Devil Trigger star on the chopper, and then you can actually use the other Devil Trigger star on this level in order to kill Pluto a little bit quicker. However, here I'm going to be using the combo of 1, 2, 3 into high time, which is Dante's upward sweeping motion, where he comes from the ground up with his sword, and we're going to use that to build Devil Trigger in order to fight the boss, and just, get into a position where we can do some million stab combos. So right here you see I kind of get around to his back so that he has to face me in order to attack at all. Then we can actually get some Devil Trigger for a million stab. There I probably should have dodge rolled, played a little bit more safe, but I can just dodge roll right back to him after the knockdown animation. There I use DT to tank some of his attacks. There's some lasers that come across the screen here, but they're generally not really an issue. You even saw there that Pluto's hitboxes themselves are not really that generous in his favor, because that swing went pretty much right through my head. But that is the end of the mission there. And the next mission is actually just going to be a boss fight with none other than Arius himself. And Arius wears a white suit and carries a magnum. He also summons demons around him in order to protect himself. He has a couple of different attacks. He can either stand there and do nothing, he can stand there and shoot you, he can call a shield up around himself, or he can teleport away to the sides of the arena and sit on the tables and either smoke or, shoot the magnum at you. Fortunately here he was pretty nice to me. You can also call it these ground spikes or call them behind him. But, fortunately that just doesn't matter to us while we're in Devil Trigger. We grabbed a small Devil Star in order to just use it right at the beginning of the fight there and just Devil Trigger Stinger him to death. Mission 14 is quite a lot of walking or rolling I should say, because we have to destroy or activate 4 light wheels in order to open up a door that leads us to a fight with one of the Devil May Cry 1 bosses, Phantom, who is not really as intimidating in this game as they are in Devil May Cry 1. But what we're going to do here in order to activate this one in the air really quickly is use the aerial raid in order to hit it really quickly and only destroy it with a few strikes. Then rolling across the top of the buildings here, we're going to actually get to the room that has the the Healing Heart as well as Merciless in it. However, we don't really care about either of those items. So we're going to actually despawn the enemies in the room by running up a crack or a fissure in the wall. So once we go over to the right here and you see this little crack or fissure here, we're just going to run up it, and it just despawns all the enemies. This allows us to just very quickly activate the light wheel here without having to deactivate the lock-on system or anything. The third light wheel is going to be surrounded by a bunch of enemies, so it's actually, and it's not any that we can despawn. So unfortunately, we are going to have to hold down that R2 again and make sure that we're, placing our sword in the correct position in order to activate it pretty quickly. Otherwise, we're going to get accosted by more of these demons. What helps out here is Dante's side tilt combo, where he just does these 3 sweeping attacks that reach quite far around him. As you saw, that one even there hit. Then this last light wheel is also going to be surrounded by enemies. Fortunately, it's going to be much easier to attack because it's going to be in the air, and we're going to be able to use the aerial rave or the round trip again. And we're going to be able to just ignore all the enemies in the room, because we're just going to do an air hike and then activate Devil Trigger, and within a few strikes it will be down, and then we're going to be able to go and fight Phantom. So here we go. 1. Oop, I had to readjust there. There we go. Oh boy. I don't remember having this much trouble with it. Oh boy, I don't remember. This was bad. There we go, 3 attacks. Unfortunately, I can't go into this fight with as much Devil Trigger as I would have liked to, but I'm just going to play it a little bit more safe and just use the 1, 2, 3 high time combos on Phantom, as well as hopefully some dodge rolls in order to make things a little bit easier on myself. Devil Trigger here is mostly just going to be used to dodge Phantom's attacks, not necessarily to deal damage. We are going to, of course, be using DT Stinger. I can also use the forward tilt combo that Dante has in Devil Trigger. I am kind of just taking damage pretty willy-nilly because I am kind of hoping that Phantom just accidentally sends me into Majin. And Devil Trigger does sort of mitigate this a little bit, but it's nothing to really bank on. So I did kind of I didn't really like where the health on Phantom was at, so I just backed off, grabbed the green orb there to refill my health, and then continued the fight. This fight would have gone a lot smoother if I had had a better room previously, but we can work with what we've got here. There is going to be a little bit of time loss, but really nothing too crazy. And down goes Phantom. So this next mission is a mission where you are timed as well, but this is not a Capcom escape sequence mission. This is just a mission where the game says, oh, you have to defeat this amount of enemies within a certain time, and then you can actually go to the underworld to fight some of the final stretch of bosses. There is no boss on this mission, it's just the waves of enemies, and you can see that there's a 3-minute timer there. So if you don't complete this, it is pretty much about a 3-minute time loss, which was super brutal until the more technical clears were discovered, which mostly involved, once again, sort of, keeping those combos up and keeping that Devil Trigger gauge up. You see me there using like 1-2 into 1-2-3 high time as well. And I'm also knocking down the flying enemies a little bit with the guns and then using the melee to finish them off instead of just using the guns to finish them, because that is slower. And it also doesn't build as much Devil Trigger if you just take them down with just the guns. Now, here I'm actually just keeping the Devil Trigger that I have for the Goats wave, because the Goats pack a really decent, like really huge punch, and I really don't want to mess with them without having at least a little bit of Devil Trigger there. Here I used it as well to just clean up some of the enemies there, as well as maintain the Showtime combo that I had. Unfortunately, this enemy did kind of fly around the center of the stage and kind of got out of my range. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to waste as much Devil Trigger there. The goats here go down pretty easily to Dante's Devil Trigger. I don't really have to use the shotgun or anything, although it is there for me as a safety backup, or just in case I need it, just in case I need to knock one of them down. These Abyss goats are a little bit stronger than the blood goats, you know. And probably about a good time for this mission to end, I would say, is probably around the 30-40 second mark. I don't actually remember what world record ends around, but world record actually uses a strat where you stand at that white door in the background and you let the hand actually attack you. And the hand will do enough damage to you that you can use Majin again, and you can use the Majin to clear an entire wave, especially with a move that Dante has where he does a huge, burst that just is map wide. Fortunately here also I got a white orb that gave me just a lot of Devil Trigger right out the gate, and I was able to use that in order to clean up a bunch of the enemies. Unfortunately, that eye there got in my way, otherwise I would have been able to maintain Showtime a little bit longer. And that's the end of the mission. Yep, ended right around about 31 seconds. So that was pretty decent. Could have been a little bit better, but still pretty decent for the strats that I was using. Coming kind of into the home stretch here, the last 3 missions. This mission is kind of a headache, especially when you're first picking up the game, because the boss called Triface, it switches between 3 heads that are vulnerable. A ice head, a fire head, and a lightning head. And fortunately for Dante, he can just Majin it, which is what I'm going to do here. It doesn't take a whole lot to set Majin up here, and it's a pretty easy one cycle to do, though I do fail it in this video because the laser does not come out on time. So then I do have to just kind of hang back and just use some old strats there. But the goats here, again, you just kind of want to build up the style ranks on them and just get as many orbs from them as you can while still maintaining optimal clears there. Unfortunately, these guys do like to just drop kick me, don't they? Quite a shame. The elevators too. It's really weird that there's only a couple of games and there's only a couple doors in this game that you actually have to interact with directly in order to make them, in order to get through them. And that's one of the doors in Mission 2, which activates that light wheel puzzle, and the elevators in this mission. All the other doors you can just go through by just getting close to them. Here is just another example of, maintaining the style ranks, trying to not take damage, and just trying to get as many orbs from the enemies as possible. The enemies here are on a timer as well. It's not triggered by death really or anything. So you can just kind of wail on them all and then get finished with all of them before the elevator comes up to the top there. There is a movement puzzle here. I guess the game throws more of those orbs at us that we saw on the mission where we were infiltrating the underground temple. But the solution to it is pretty simple, which is going to be a bunch of quick forward jumps in order to get up to the top, where we're going to grab a heart-looking object. We'll see what it's called here in a second. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then just an air hike here. Boom, the sacrilege. And the sacrilege is just going to open up and transform this sort of, I guess it's an office building or just a huge high-rise skyscraper. And it's just going to keep changing it to become more and more demonic until we're finally able to access fighting the Triface. This is also going to be our last encounter with Balverk. And Balverk is really not going to be any different than how we fought him before. World Record also Majins this version of Balverk, but that's a very risky strategy because you are giving up a lot of orbs on the elevator, and you need to have an insanely strong early game in order to do that. So instead I just opt to go with the strategies that we employed earlier against Volverk and just double trigger stinger him in the face. While the wolves continue to just be the center of attention. You know, I mean, they are pretty cute, so I can't really blame the camera for focusing on them. So with Volverk defeated, it is actually time to go and defeat Triface now. And before that, there is going to be another sacrilege pickup, and we're going to have to ride another elevator. So you're going to see me take damage in the elevator, and then I'm going to walk to avoid a green orb that is, you know, right outside of the elevator. There's been a couple of runs where I accidentally ran into that, and it's just totally ruined the whole strat, but it's not hard to avoid. So here we're just going to roll through these couple of rooms, and it is important that once you get into the red health state in this elevator, you just make sure that you just kind of run along the walls and stuff in order so that the enemies don't hit you. It is pretty imperative that you take out this goat pretty much immediately, though, because the amount of damage that this goat does is just not something that you want to deal with, and it's not something that you want to have to calculate your Majin health around. The enemies here that wield the cleavers and stuff, they do a lot less damage, and you can mitigate it more and calculate it a little bit easier with double trigger if you so decide. So there we go. Got into the red health. And now I'm good to just jump on out. There's the walk around. There's the... If I had just rolled forward, I would have hit that green orb, but we just walked around it. And then the Triface fight activates. And like I said before, Triface operates on a 3-head system here, where you have to basically check it with your pistols. Just kind of cycle around the heads to see which one is actually taking damage. And then I just go to the side here and start firing the Majin fireballs at it. Unfortunately, I input the laser here, you see, on the input display, but for whatever reason, the game didn't give it to me. And so otherwise, Triface would have just been dead by this point. Unfortunately, I do actually waste my gold orb here because I was in the middle of a shotgun blast, and I couldn't dodge roll out in time. But really, no matter. That gold orb is pretty much exactly, you know, it's a very convenient pickup because it's part of actually, you know, having to do the story of the game. And it also just gives us a built-in backup strategy for this and for the chopper, but the chopper is much less of an issue than this fight is. Normally, if you one-cycle Triface, you will have to deal with dodging a giant fireball here that it shoots at you, which is pretty easy to dodge because the front roll in this game has a ton of iframes. But there, since I shot it and it wasn't already at 0 health, I could just shoot it and skip that whole animation. This is the last fight with Arius here. We're going to grab a large Devil Star for this. And some of the old strats involved using the missile launcher when he was sitting down in order to do a lot of damage to him and do some AoE to his servants and build a bunch of double trigger off that. Here we're just going to use the large Devil Star and then just wreck him with more double trigger stinger. This Arius likes to really just, you know, mess with you and just kind of teleport around. I've had plenty of fights where he'll just really won't let you get a word in edgewise and will just teleport around the room. This Arius that I'm getting here is actually really friendly because he's doing a lot of the spike attacks. And just, since you're in double trigger, you can just totally ignore it. But that was pretty much a perfect second Arius there. The last mission... jackpot question mark, is going to be against 2 bosses, Argosax the Chaos and Despair Embodied. So for here we're going to grab a bunch of Devil Stars, and as well as the Vital Stars just in case, because I didn't really have the money to grab the Devil Stars that I wanted, but that's what, you know, that's what happens when you die. So here I'm going to let this boss, the Argosax the Chaos, I should say, is an amalgamation of a ton of the bosses that you have fought up to this point, including Griffin from DMC1 is also in there. So we're going to actually get into Majin form by using the laser from that enemy, and then we're going to keep refilling our Majin gauge, or our Devil Trigger gauge in Majin, in order to just keep firing fireballs at all the different aspects of this enemy. And then we're going to be just moving on. Yeah, just rolling through the heads like this. Since I don't have an extra Devil Star here or a 4th Devil Star here, I am not going to be able to completely kill this enemy. So I do just want to take out the problematic heads. Unfortunately there I also meant to do the laser, but I got the big burst, so it didn't really do anything for me. Fortunately, these vital stars that I have here are going to just allow me to survive a little bit longer in order to get to Despair Embodied. I decide that I'm going to take out Griffin first because Griffin is quite problematic, and I want to make sure that he's down before I attempt anything with the Bull, because the Bull is by comparison much easier, and I want to just make sure that if I'm going to use my vital stars here, it's going to be against Griffin. So I'm kind of just standing at a distance here, making sure that I can shotgun cancel. I'm just kind of taking the damage in stride because it's basically free Devil Trigger in order to, you know, defeat him. And then we just move on to the Bull. Again, here I just kind of want to Devil Trigger, or I want to get to a Devil Trigger state, but here I'm going to instead shotgun cancel, just in a very safe spot. There was also a safe spot that people used to sit with the missile launcher, but that is still kind of pretty slow compared to the shotgun canceling. Again, really just kind of taking the damage in stride because I gain Devil Trigger off of it, and there's a possibility that I can set up for a Majin. So with him almost dead, then we're going to move on to Despair Embodied. And with the state that the run is in now, I can actually just use a death abuse, where I got kind of lucky here, and Despair Embodied killed me really quickly. So when you die in this game, and you have to choose a continue, you refill with full Devil Trigger. It's similar to a gold orb, it's just that you respawn at a checkpoint with it. Fortunately, the checkpoint in this level is the Despair Embodied, so I wouldn't have to start all the way back over at Argosax the Chaos. So dying to Despair Embodied here, depending on the state of your run, is actually pretty advantageous. And then from there, you can just kind of Devil Trigger Stinger it. If Despair Embodied happens to give you a Majin state, that is the fastest way to defeat it. And that's also, again, why I'm just taking the damage in stride here. Because whatever attacks it does to me can potentially just set me up for a quick kill with the Majin. At this point, it's not really worth it, but I don't really... It's pretty much dead anyway, so I just kind of take the chance. And that is Devil May Cry 2, New Game Dante. Thanks for watching.